At the core of this drum miking techniques video is the Allen & Heath SQ5 digital mixer. This board is incredibly powerful as a live soundboard, but equally powerful at the center of your recording setup. Most people go directly to any number of 2, 4, and 8 channel audio interfaces. However, the benefits of using a digital mixer in your recording setup are numerous and worth taking a look at. The SQ5 connects to your DAW via USB streaming that's core audio compliant for the Mac and that uses ASIO and WDM drivers for PC. USB streaming lets you record up to 32 simultaneous channels, all at full 96 kHz 24-bit audio quality. These recordings were all captured not on my DAW, but on a thumb drive inserted into the mixer. On this board, the thumb drive can record up to 16 channels of 9624 audio. I was able to take the board and my drums to an undisclosed location and plug the mic straight into the mixer. Once the tracks are recorded, I simply import them into Pro Tools on my Mac and continue from there. Today, we're working through the drum set, starting with the kick drum. Most of the time, it's a good idea to use 2 mics on the kick, one inside the drum and one on the outside. But for this example, I'm using 4 different types of microphones so we can hear the differences that each type provides. It's possible to get a great kick sound with just one mic, but since the drum sound must be appropriate for the genre, knowing what to expect from each of these mics will help you make an appropriate choice in your own recordings. The Audio-Technica ATM250 is designed for kick drum and other instruments that generate a lot of low-end volume. It's typically used inside the kick, aimed at the beater for more attack, and out toward the shell for more tone. The Shure Beta 91A is a pressure zone condenser mic that sits inside the kick drum, usually on a pillow or blanket. This mic picks up a lot of attack and a clear controlled bass tone. The Solomon Low Freq picks up the lows in the kick and works very well when positioned directly in front of the head from an inch or 2 away. For a long time, it's been popular to place a large diaphragm condenser mic in front of the kick head to capture some tone that's missed by the inside mic. The go-to mic for this purpose is the classic Neumann U47 FET and sometimes the Sony C500 from the 70s. I'm using an Audio-Technica AT4047, which is inspired by the U47. But unlike its vintage heroes, the 4047 sounds great every time I put it up and doesn't suffer from old and fading components. Now let's listen to these microphones, and note that these are direct into the console with no EQ, compression, or effects. The Audio-Technica ATM250. The Shure Beta 91A. The Solomon Low Freq. The Audio-Technica AT4047. When it's time to combine the sounds from multiple microphones on one source, we always need to take into consideration their phase relationship. Just the fact that there's a difference between the distance between one mic and another to the kick drum means that there's a potential for those two microphones to have captured the same sound at a different point in phase. So the way we do that is we go right here. Here are the 4 kick drum tracks that we recorded. And we simply zoom in and look at where each one of them starts. This one starts with a crest, goes to a trough. But this one starts with a trough and goes to a crest, which means that these two waveforms are nearly 180 degrees out of phase. This is the low freq microphone, which is slower responding. It's kind of like a large moving coil microphone, so it's not the fastest responding mic. And this is the beta 91, which is a small diaphragm condenser mic. So it's the benchmark for quick responding microphones in this group. There are a couple ways that we could fix this problem. First, we could take this waveform and just invert the phase. And there are a few ways we could do that. In Pro Tools, they have a clip effects window that you can just change the polarity just by clicking on polarity. Not all DAWs have that. The other way to do this that's a little bit more visual is to use the Audio Suite plugin and just simply select invert and render. And now, instead of this being a trough to start with, it's a crest. And the difference between the sound when we change that polarity is really what we're going for. So let's listen to it in its original state, just these 2 kick drums. And we can see that these 2 waveforms are out of phase and that the polarity on one of them needs to be reversed. Let's take a listen. Now, at the same place, I'll invert the phase. Of the low freq mic. And now listen. That's a pretty amazing difference. So we'll start with these 2 waveforms out of phase, and then I'll simply click on the polarity button, and you'll be able to hear the difference. Then back out of polarity. Now reversing the polarity. So you can hear that that low end just solidifies when we reverse the polarity on that low freq mic. So with this polarity reversed on this low freq track, now we'll start with just the beta 91, and then I'll turn the low freq up until we get a good balance of high and low end. You can hear that there's a wide range of sounds that we can create just with the addition of that low freq mic, all the way from very boomy to just a little more solid than it was with just the beta 91. The beta 91 in this case is adding a really nice attack. The low freq fills in the bottom. Now, if we wanted to start with ATM 250 and add the low freq, here's the ATM 250. Which is a very different sound. We can make that sound big. That's a very throaty sound. That's a usable sound. We could do a lot with that. And now let's listen to the AT4047. Which is a completely different kind of a sound. A lot of times we'll combine that with something like the ATM 250. And that's a nice sound too. Or we could combine that with beta 91. There's a lot of usable sound in those 4 microphones. But a lot of it hinges on whether or not we inverted that low freq. Because if we take this sound that we've built up that's nice with the low freq in phase, if we hadn't have inverted the phase on that microphone, we'd end up with this sound, as opposed to That sound. So it's very important to check the phase on multiple microphones anytime you have them on the same sound source. It's very common to use two mics on a snare drum. The top mic tends to capture more body and tone, and the bottom mic captures the crispness of the snares rattling against the bottom head. The mic aimed at the top head of this snare drum is an Audio-Technica ATM 230, a dynamic mic with an upper presence peak that's similar to the Shure SM57, a very commonly used mic for snare drum. Underneath the snare drum, pointed up at the snares, I'm using an Audio-Technica ATM 450, a side address small diaphragm condenser mic. It's also common to use a dynamic mic like the SM57 underneath the snare because it can handle a lot of volume and abuse. Plus, it has a built-in presence peak that highlights the snare sound. I like the ability of a condenser mic under the snare to capture very accurate and clean transients, so I tend to use a mic like the ATM 450 or an AKG 451 or 414. In a live show, I often use something like the SM57. Aim the top mic at the center of the head for more attack, and down toward the rim for more tone. The ideal location for clean and powerful snare and tom mics is 4 or 5 inches above the head, aimed at the spot where the stick hits the head. If you work with the mics to find the sound you need for the music, you'll get better sounding recordings and need less EQ in the mix. It's important that the mic under the snare drum be reversed in polarity relative to the top mic. The fact that it's pointing up and the top mic points down indicates that they're out of phase. Aim the bottom mic up at the snares and slightly away from the kick drum to take advantage of the fact that the hypercardioid polar pattern rejects sounds from about 120 degrees off axis from the front of the capsule. And if you're using a condenser mic with a built-in pad and high-pass filter, use both of them. The pad keeps the capsule from distorting, and the high-pass filter keeps the focus on the high-frequency snare sounds. Listen to these two microphones individually. Now, here they are together, starting out of phase. Listen as I invert the polarity on the bottom mic. These toms both have ATM 230s aimed at the spot where the stick hits the head. Depending on how much you want the toms to ring, muffling might be required. Personally, I like a sound that's open but controlled, so I usually put some moon gel or slap clats on the head until I find just the right tone. Aim the mics at the center of the drum for a clean attack and pure tone, or down toward the rim for less attack and more tone. Listen as I change the position of the mic on this rack tom. If you have enough channels and microphones, try miking the bottom tom heads too. They can add to the tom tone, but always invert the polarity of the bottom mic so the two mics will work together instead of fighting each other. Listen to the differences in the top and bottom tom mics. Now listen to them together and notice the difference when I change the polarity on the bottom mic. A small diaphragm condenser mic is a common choice to mic a hi-hat. This side address ATM 450 is aimed down at the hi-hat but also away from the crash cymbal to take advantage of off-axis discrimination. Aim the mic at the bell for more highs and towards the edge of the cymbal for more lows. Always adjust the position of the hi-hat mic for the sound you need for the music. Listen as I change the position of this hi-hat microphone. Listen to the differences in the sounds captured by these overhead mics as I change their positions. The XY technique is phase coherent, meaning it works well in stereo and mono, and captures a balance of the cymbals without a focus on the toms. The ORTF pattern is a little like an extended XY pattern and provides a wider image of the kit, but still with relatively stable phase coherence. A spaced pair is common, but always make sure that the two microphones are equidistant from the center of the snare drum to ensure that the snare will be in phase anytime the two mics are combined to mono. Early on, the iconic engineer Glyn Johns came up with an overhead placement that used a mic a few feet above the snare drum and another mic on the floor tom side just a little higher than the top of the drum. With this technique, it's also very important that the two overheads are equidistant from the center of the snare drum.